evening, everyone. Thank you all for being so prompt. We've got somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 RSVPs for this evening, and probably about 60 or so already appeared in the Zoom. So thank you, everyone, for not only your timeliness, but also your interest in what is an essential element of life in Prospect Heights. And again, thank you all for being so passionate about livable streets that you want to turn out at 7 p.m. on a Monday night and talk about it for an hour or so. My name is Robert Witherwax. I am the current chair of the Prospect Heights Neighborhood Development Corporation. I am joined by a few other officers, certainly Mr. Gib Vacconi, who is our secretary of the Prospect Heights Neighborhood Development Corporation, or PHNDC, as I will describe it. He is our outreach coordinator in general and specifically our Vanderbilt Avenue volunteer coordinator. I don't know if Mr. Bob Began is with us tonight. Mr. Began is one of the co-chairs of the Livable Streets Committee, of which this is a project of theirs. His co-chair, Roz Parr, unfortunately cannot join us tonight, but I wanted to thank Gib, Bob, and Roz for their efforts over the summer and especially over the last 3 weekends as we've managed to implement Open Streets Carlton Underhill and Open Streets Restaurant Vanderbilt. I'd also like to note two people in particular, Mr. Matt Weinstein and Mr. Jeff Phillips, who are respectively our volunteer coordinators for Underhill Avenue Open Streets and Carlton Avenue Open Streets. And they've been the people who have been out there every day, or getting people out there every day to move the barricades back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and keep the streets open for us all summer. So thank you, Matt and Jeff, and thank you to all your volunteers. We are also joined tonight by at least 3 people from the Department of Transportation of New York City. I'd like to point out Mr. Keith Bray, who is the Brooklyn Borough Commissioner, Emily Rakelm, who is with the Brooklyn Borough Commissioner's Office, and Kyle Gorman, who is not with the Brooklyn office, but he is the Senior Program Manager for the Public Space Unit, and Open Streets, Carlton, and Underhill are his department. So thank you guys for spending your hour this evening to join us. I know also, and we'll get to them a little bit down the agenda, we have some of the merchants on Vanderbilt, the restaurateurs and bar owners who have participated in Open Streets restaurants on Vanderbilt for the last 3 weekends, and we'll have an opportunity to hear from them tonight. When I'm finished with the intro, I'm going to ask Gib to give a presentation. We're going to walk through a slideshow. I will ask our DOT reps after that if they want to say anything. Again, I'll ask the merchants if they want to say anything, and then we'll open it up for questions. So hopefully after about 15 minutes of program, we will hear from you guys. A couple of ground rules. The term open streets can be confusing. Open when, open to who, open what, right? So to be clear, when we say open streets, we mean the barricades are in place. When a street is open, that means that it is closed to through vehicular traffic. When a street is not open, that means the barricades are on the sidewalks, right? So open means pedestrians and public uses can happen. So keep that in mind so you don't get turned around when we're talking about what's open, what's closed. Open means the barricades are in place. The general scope for tonight. This is not going to be a referendum or an open-ended discussion on everything traffic and transit related. Even though we do have the Brooklyn Borough Commissioner here tonight, we're not going to talk about speed bumps, bulb outs, things like that, right? We're going to keep it limited to these 3 avenues and the immediate implications of the Open Streets programs that are in effect on them. So thank you for your cooperation with that. If we stray too far, you'll hear one of my favorite refrains: "That's a great question to take to our committee," the Livable Streets Committee. On that point, respect for all viewpoints, please. We have a multiplicity of people who have different viewpoints. We're all one community trying to come together in a very difficult time to be in New York City. So you're going to hear things that strike you tonight as being totally wrong-headed. Respect for each other and respect for me as your moderator. If I tell you, sorry, we need to move on, please be prepared to do so. Again, we're going to try to keep this to about an hour. Your cooperation is appreciated. PHNDC, who am I? Who are we? Again, my name is Robert Witherwax. I'm the chair. PHNDC, as the slide in front of you says, is a nonprofit civic organization that was founded in 2004. We advocate for the residents and businesses of Prospect Heights. Our mission is to bring Prospect Heights community members together to build a safer, more just and sustainable neighborhood. Currently, we have about 100 active members. Membership is open to anyone age 18 or more. The members elect a board, which sets procedure and policy for the organization. We are not a block association. We are a group of concerned citizens who get together from time to time to work on specific issues of advocacy for the betterment of Prospect Heights. Currently, we have committees that are dedicated to historic preservation, landmarking and such, street conditions, our Livable Streets Committee, under which this program was sponsored, tenants' rights education and issues of housing and pressures in that front, and emergency preparedness. Although we only have 100 or so members who qualify because of some of the rigors in that, we have an outreach program that reaches at least 3,000 people directly in our weekly emails and our Facebook posts, and of course, go on beyond that. And we had over 500 unique attendees at the several different events that we held in 2019 in Prospect Heights, when we could actually hold events in Prospect Heights. Those were the days, right? We'll be there again soon. Next slide, please. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, actually, next slide, what we've done livable streets wise historically, because livable streets and transportation issues have been central to the identity of PHNDC and what we've worked for. This is a brief timeline of what we've hit over the years. 2005, we helped bring bike lanes to Vanderbilt Avenue, and in 2008, we helped develop the plans and implement the plans for the central median. We advocated for the signalization of Carlton Avenue and Park Place. It used to be just stop signs. Grand Army Plaza, those of us who've been around at least 10 years remember what it used to look like, especially at the southern end and at the bow tie in the northern end. Well, those traffic islands that were raised from zebra striped paint, PHNDC was a key partner in the movement that brought those. Bike corrals on Vanderbilt, the slow zone that we implemented in 2016, the advocacy was led by members of PHNDC, and the historic lighting that came to Vanderbilt Avenue in 2019 too. So livable streets, central to our mission. If I had my way, we'd have special car lanes and bikes and buses would have the rest of the road, but you know, we work toward those goals as we find them as a consensus. I'm now going to turn over back to Mr. Vicconi and ask him to take us through the rest of the slideshow. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Rob. I'm going to just back up a second to this previous slide, and I'm going to try to do that anyway. Sometimes it takes me a while to figure out how to do this on Zoom. I want to just make, at the outset, kind of a few key points about open streets, just to keep in mind while we are doing the rest of this presentation. The New York City Department of Transportation's Open Streets and Open Streets Restaurants program offer what I believe is an unprecedented level of responsibility to communities for determining how our neighborhood streets can best provide the most benefit to residents and businesses during the COVID-19 emergency. I've lived in New York City for 40 years, and I can't ever remember a time when there was this much latitude given to local communities to have a voice in how their streets are used. And with that comes a lot of responsibility. The operation of open streets on Carlton Avenue and Underhill Avenue and Vanderbilt Avenue has to be coordinated to ensure safety. The only way we can continue to do this is if it's safe for everyone. And the continued maintenance of these programs in Prospect Heights is dependent on access to the necessary barriers and signage, as well as to a pool of volunteers whose effort can be coordinated. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more tonight. First, I wanted to just identify the restaurants that are participating in the program. We've got many on all blocks of Vanderbilt Avenue, the 5 blocks that are in the area. It's been a real pleasure getting to know the proprietors of these establishments and their employees. I'm actually going to see if perhaps some of you would like to speak up and say hello, and maybe just talk briefly about your experience thus far on Open Streets restaurants. I see Chris is here. I see Stefano is here. And any of you who would like to speak, if you want to raise your hand, I'm happy to bring you in for a second. Go ahead, Chris.
Great. So it's a pleasure to be part of this Zoom meeting. Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Meister, the proprietor of Beerwax. We were, to be quite honest, mid-July, considering options for closing. It was a very tough moment for us with COVID, obviously. So when we heard news of open streets, it was a huge boost, and it's proven to be really a huge value add for us. We're seeing pre-COVID sales numbers, and it really has been our lifeline right now when we were considering, options to really start ramping down. Now we have some hope and some faith that we can keep going up until the fall, depending on, what's going to happen past October 31st, with a lot of the mandates from the state. But it really has been a lifeline for us. So I thank all the folks that have helped this happen for all the restaurants on Vanderbilt Avenue.
Thanks very much, Chris. And I see a couple other folks are on too. Max Katzenberg of Olmsted and Masoniaki and Liz Kwan from White Tiger. Can I invite either of you to say a couple words?
Sure. Hi, I'm Max Katzenberg, co-owner of Olmsted and Masoniaki. Just want to thank PHNDC and the community of Prospect Heights for letting this happen. COVID has been extraordinarily challenging for the restaurant industry, as everybody knows, and we've been talking a lot with all of our neighbors throughout this open streets process. And just to echo what Chris has said, this is the first time that the businesses on the block are seeing any ray of hope. Hearing businesses get back to near pre-COVID levels of revenue, that's something that none of us were even thinking was possible through open streets. So it's been exceeding expectations in a lot of ways, and it wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for PHNDC and the entire community. So thank you, and looking forward to the rest of the meeting.
Terrific. Thank you, Max. And Alan.
Hey, Gib, could I say something real quick? I'm one of the owners of Branded Saloon along with Gerard Cove.
Sure, welcome, Alex. Thanks for joining.
Hey, how are you? Hi. I do have to echo Chris and the other gentleman, Max, who just spoke. And absolutely, we're in the exact same boat. Gerard and I had made the decision a few times in June and July to possibly make the decision after 10 years. Our anniversary was May 27th to close Branded for good. And only because of this and everything that you guys have done, it has given us that breath of pause to say, you know what, maybe we can make this. Maybe we can get through this. So thank all of you for doing that. I know it's not easy. Obviously, we're all going through the same thing, but this program has definitely helped tremendously. So depending on what happens this winter, I think, at least from Branded's point of view, we're going to, we're standing strong for now. So thank you guys for all that.
Thanks so much, Alex. I'm gonna return now to our deck. 1 second, and take an opportunity to also thank our volunteers. We have a large number of volunteers for this program. This is our Open Streets Restaurants program, and I would say this is a large project by PHNDC standards. I mean, we do large projects. We've protected 850 historic buildings in the neighborhood and things like that. But this project is unique in that it requires coordination of a lot of people. And just as it's been great working with the business owners on Vanderbilt Avenue, it's been really super working with our group of volunteers who just have been tremendous. So I wanted to thank all of you that have volunteered, and I'm going to kind of do the same thing and ask if any of you who are on the call tonight are inclined to just talk a bit about your experience on Open Streets Restaurants.
Sure, I will.
Thanks, Michael.
This is about the easiest volunteering I ever did. It was so incredibly organized, and hearing the restaurateurs here, but knowing their situation, was such a powerful incentive. But I just sort of thank you, the organizers, for doing it, because again, as a volunteer, we're doing the least amount of work in this. So it's all our pleasure.
Thanks a lot, Michael. And any other volunteers interested in saying a couple words?
Oh, Bob Began here. I'm the co-chair.
Oh, hey, Bob. Thanks for joining us.
Of course. I've been here the whole time. The Livable Streets Committee. This is such an extraordinarily important initiative for the entire community. It's so important to keep all our restaurants viable. Unfortunately, we can't do more for all the other merchants, but we can assist the restaurants. And so this is a noble endeavor. You're saving people's jobs. You're keeping people here in the city. And we have this hurdle to overcome, and we are overcoming this great hurdle, I think. And many thanks to Gib Vaconi. He's been extraordinary in this whole process. Thank you, Gib.
Thanks, Bob. I'm gonna go back now to our deck for a second. I want to say that in advance of this meeting, I did speak. I emailed our restaurant participants and asked about the impact to see if we could get a sense of quantifying the impact of open streets on their business. And I think that's something we'll return to after we have some more experience with the program. For now, I don't know that I had enough of an opportunity to pull together something definitive, but the restaurants that responded are reporting anywhere from 30 to 100% boost in business and revenue from the pre-COVID weekend immediately before Open Streets to what is being produced on the Open Streets weekend. So it's really a tremendous change and something that we're delighted to be able to be a part of. Okay, so I'm going to give a little background into both the Open Streets and the Open Streets Restaurants program in Prospect Heights. The Open Streets program covers Carlton Avenue between Flatbush and Dean Street and Underhill Avenue between St. John's Place and Bergen Street. Prospect Heights Neighborhood Development Council applied for several streets in Prospect Heights, about, I think, probably a half a dozen altogether to be considered for open streets, and DOT approved Carlton and Underhill in May of 2020. This program was initially intended to be managed by the NYPD 78th and 77th precincts on Carlton and Underhill Avenues, respectively. It's just because of how things have played out with some of the events of the summer, I don't know that that's happening as robustly as we maybe anticipated, but that was the sense when we began. At present, there's no end date for the Open Streets program, so we're very interested in finding a way to be able to continue it as long as possible, supplementing management by the 78th and 77th with volunteers from the neighborhood. Open Streets Restaurants covers Vanderbilt Avenue between Park Place and Pacific Street. The Open Streets Restaurant program was something we applied for after putting together an application with about 20 restaurant owners on Vanderbilt Avenue. It was approved early in August 2020. And this program is managed by PHNDC formally. We have an agreement with the Department of Transportation, and we have been able to coordinate volunteers and restaurants behind the process. So this is now authorized through October 2020, and we expect to be able to continue it through then. And this is kind of the way the Open Streets landscape looked at the beginning of August. So we have Open Streets on Carlton Avenue and Underhill Avenue, respectively, open 7 days, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Open Streets Restaurants on Vanderbilt Avenue, open from Friday at 5 p.m. to 10 p.m., and then Saturday 12 p.m. to 10 p.m., Sunday 12 p.m. to 10 p.m. The street is closed an hour in advance of those times to allow restaurants time to set up their seating in the roadway, and breakdown is authorized for up to an hour after that time, but typically breakdown has ended well before 11 o'clock. So there's a couple challenges that we want to talk about that we have recognized over the last couple of weeks. There's some general concerns about the Carlton and Underhill Avenue open streets. The first one is drivers have tended to circumvent barriers on those streets, and we think there's a number of reasons that happens. The streets themselves are not intended to be fully closed by barriers. They are supposed to permit local traffic and parking by local traffic. And although the programs are popular, they're not fully utilized during all program hours. I've been spending some time over the last couple of weeks walking both avenues, and the utilization is not consistent during the entire day. So drivers may not always be certain that the street is open for pedestrians, which is kind of an encouragement for them to move around the barriers, even though they may not be through, they may be through traffic. And finally, we've had, because of the circumventing of the barriers, they often get struck, they get damaged by vehicles, and they become unusable. So we're sort of constantly trying to figure out how we can cobble together enough barriers to assemble on the street to continue to keep them closed. As I mentioned before, although originally it was the intention that that the precincts would handle placement and removal of barriers, it now depends on an informal network of residents. And as I mentioned before, the duration of the program is indeterminate. So we don't really know how long we'll need to maintain volunteers to support these programs. And again, I want to point out that the volunteers have effectively jumped into the breach and sort of taken on the task of placing and removing barriers. A couple specific issues on Underhill and Carlton Avenue. With respect to Underhill, increased pressure from the southbound traffic that gets diverted during Open Street's restaurant on Vanderbilt Avenue makes it more likely that drivers will begin to circumvent open streets. And we're very concerned about that, particularly in the evening on Fridays when rush hour traffic is diverted from Vanderbilt Avenue. What we would not like to see happen is have somebody who is perhaps, in the street with their family on their own, all of a sudden encounter a car coming down Underhill Avenue, not expecting to find people there. So that's a situation of concern. And then the second issue on Carlton is there's been a very significant redirection of northbound traffic onto Park Place during all hours of operation. Initially, when we discovered this, I think that the folks on Park Place worked very hard to be accommodating and put on a game face and understood that the program wasn't going to continue forever. But since right now it does have kind of an indefinite duration, I think justifiably they're looking to find some kind of a solution that will allow them to regain some quality of life on their street. One of the things we tried, and DOT was very helpful with this, was to move the southern end of the open street to Flatbush and Carlton and close the intersection there. Unfortunately, we have found that there is no way to ensure those barriers are maintained there without somebody physically standing there and doing it full time. They get moved very, very quickly. I can speak from personal experience on that when I have placed the barriers there and come back sometimes just a few minutes later and find that they're gone. So we have a couple of solutions we would like to propose, and these are really proposed for discussion. They've been brought to some of the concerned blocks, and while I don't think they necessarily make everyone happy, we do think that they represent a reasonable accommodation to keep all of these programs going. The first is we would like to move the southern barrier of the Carlton Avenue open street to St. Mark's Avenue. The reason that we want to do that is because we believe that will relieve part of the current traffic overflow onto Park Place and distribute it a little bit more so that it's more absorbable by residents on those other east-west streets. And then with respect to both open streets, we want to continue having the open streets on Carlton and Underhill pause at 4 p.m. on Friday evening and resume at 8 a.m. on Monday morning. Doing so helps us keep traffic moving through the neighborhood at a time when Vanderbilt Avenue, which is our main artery, is kind of blocked. And we believe that's a safer, that makes them both safer for everybody. And then secondly, and most importantly, we want to formalize an organization of volunteers to help place and remove barriers. I mentioned before, we've been very successful and delighted with the volunteer support that we have received for open streets on Vanderbilt. And we hope to be able to attract some community members to use or to work with us to maintain open streets on Carlton and Underhill. So our proposal would look like this, maintaining these two open streets, although with a shorter stretch on Carlton, and with a pause for the weekend during open streets on Vanderbilt. So again, I'm going to kind of repeat our key points here, and then I'll turn it back over to Rob for questions. As a community, we have an unprecedented level of responsibility with these programs. It's great to see how many people have stepped up to the plate to help be a part of maintaining this. And it's really incumbent upon all of us to understand the perspectives of all neighbors and reach an accommodation that allows us to coordinate open streets safely and for the foreseeable future. And then lastly, maintenance of the open streets program is totally dependent on barriers and signage, as well as, most importantly, a pool of volunteers whose effort can be coordinated. So if you want to get involved with open streets and you haven't been one of our volunteers yet, you are welcome to sign up. And at the end of the presentation, we will have some URLs you can use to sign up to volunteer. So thank you very much. And I'm going to turn it back over to Rob to answer some of the questions that have come up during our chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Gib. And let me second Bob's kind words to you for your coordination of the efforts, not only in putting this together tonight, but in coordinating these projects. So thank you again. I want to turn it, as I said, briefly over to our Commissioner, Keith Bray, if he would like to say a few words.
Hey, thank you. I'm actually more curious to have the conversation about the feedback too, though I am excited about the programs that is happening for Prospect Heights, and certainly DOT is happy about our partnership with SBS and other agencies to help restaurants as they've gone through obviously a very tough time during the pandemic, and our efforts to sort of help the industry in this tough time. I don't know if Kyle, I don't know if you want to say anything more about the program. We want to go to comments. I'm sort of leaning to comments.
Kyle,
I don't know. Let's go right into the feedback. But yeah, thank you to everyone who has put all their sweat equity into making this a success, and we're definitely open to tinkering with it to make it better.
Sure. Well, let me just make a note as I take this over that the chat is currently several pages long, and I'm going to try to go through this in the order that they came in. And many of them I think were addressed by the presentation, but we're going to try to go through some of the high points here. Kyle, before I do let you off the hook, do you have any news about whether we have an end date for the Open Streets program on Carlton and Underhill?
There's currently still no sunset date for the general Open Streets program. The Open Streets Restaurants program, which is specific to Vanderbilt Avenue, as of this evening is currently only until October 31st, 2020.
And there was go ahead.
I was just gonna, the last thing that I was gonna say is that the mayor has said that, similar programs will return in 2021. The exact timeline, what those are gonna look like, what the requirements are gonna be, where they're gonna be is still completely up in the air.
Thank you, because that was one of the questions in the chat. Are we pre-approved for June 2021 restart? The answer to that is no. So we have no end date for open streets on Carlton and Underhill, and we don't know whether the restaurant is going to automatically re-up. To address some of the themes that I'm finding in the chat, right? So there's a back and forth going on. There's a tension between having Carlton and Underhill too closed off so that it's difficult to move, and there's a tension between that and having them too open so it doesn't feel safe enough for people to be there, right? Well, as Kyle can attest, the design of open streets on Carlton and Underhill is to slow traffic, no through traffic, local traffic only. So if you're having a problem parking on your block and you live on an open streets block, you should be permitted to move your car on and off, right? We've had some comments about the equipment, and I want DOT to hear us loud and clear. The blue barricades get reduced to matchsticks within a matter of days, if not weeks, if not days. Metal barricades might be easier for one person to move, which has its pluses and its minuses. They're also less resistant to being destroyed by an automobile. One of the points where we've kind of fallen down, I think, in the administration of the program, and I mean we generally, is that we don't have a clear way to get more barricades when we need them. And some have appeared miraculously, and I thank whoever bestowed that on us, but the equipment is essential. The equipment is essential, and the manpower is essential. I want to underline what Gibb said about the volunteers, and I want everyone to really think about just, if you want to enjoy this program, help us own this program. Help it work for us better by coming out, by continuing as a part of the Livable Streets Committee, and by working with the existing volunteers to manage against people who don't want it to be well managed. So with that, let's turn to the chat. So 2 ways. If you have not already chatted and you want to speak, you can raise your blue hand in the participants panel, and I will try to call on you as I see you. But let me hit the chat first because that is voluminous. Hold on, sorry.
Rob, while you're looking at the chat, let me just answer one of the questions quickly that came up in the chat, which is what it is volunteers do. With respect to Vanderbilt Avenue, our volunteers are marshaling during the event. At all times when Open Streets is taking place on Vanderbilt Avenue, we have volunteers who are observing what's happening to make sure that there is compliance with the DOT program guidelines, that any barriers that got dislodged by drivers or anyone else are put back into their proper position. And then at the end of the, volunteers also assist at the beginning and the end of the open street period, queuing restaurants to put barriers in place. So the restaurants are very much partnering with us on the logistics of this. Otherwise, we wouldn't have enough hands to do it all. And our volunteers are helping to make sure that when we do open Vanderbilt for open streets, it's done safely, and likewise when we close the event and reopen the street to traffic, that is also done safely. For Carlton and Underhill Avenues, we're principally looking for volunteers who will, in the morning and in the evening, place the barricades and remove them, to make sure that that gets done on a consistent basis, and report any issues with barricades that are found. So thanks very much.
Great. So I think a lot of the questions in the chat, and forgive me for summarizing, do center around our floating proposal for reorienting the southern end of the Carlton Avenue open street, right? Moving it from Park or Flatbush, where it's supposed to be, north 2 blocks to St. Mark's. Some of the observations are that those are well-used blocks. Kids are out there a lot. James, one of our favorite restaurants, is there on that block, and we would sort of be cutting them out of the open streets if we did that. like this is a tinkering with the program. We're trying to shift burdens from one block to another. We have to work with what we've got, right? And I don't think we can either recommend totally closing one of these streets. I don't feel the support for that as I go through the chat. So it's a possible solution. We're not going to come to a consensus on it tonight. So if you feel strongly about it, I urge you to reach out to the Livable Streets Committee, and we're going to be keeping all of this chat as well. So we'll think about that and move it along as is appropriately. Somebody observes that open streets is safer for toddlers on Carlton and Underhill, small children. Vanderbilt is a little too much of a throughway, even with it being closed off for that. But let's do something a little democratically. And as we're all looking at each other, can I have a show of hands about how many people have actually feel they've used the open streets on Carlton and Underhill? You can either just raise your hand or so I'm seeing about more than half of the people I can see. Yeah, so it looks like we've got a lot of people who use them. Does anyone want to speak as a user of Carlton and Underhill?
What about all the people you can't see?
Well, I can't see you because you haven't chosen to be visible. But I'm looking at the list of people who I can see. Can I hear from somebody?
Hardly democratic.
We are doing what we can here.
I can speak about the streets
Yes.
as a user. Is this the time?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. Ever since the pandemic and the pandemic happened, the kids, it's been great for the kids to come out that live around the neighborhood. I've also met many neighbors, which has been great. And we usually come out around 5. That's usually like the time when the kids and the neighbors come out. And it's been really a positive thing for meeting.
Close it at 5.
You were saying that it's used after 5 mostly?
That's usually the time that we come out, 5 and until dark.
So that's one of the upcoming tensions, right? When school goes back into effect, I'm presuming a lot of the users are kids, right? So if they're out there, they're going to go back to school, and now they're going to come and they're going to want to use the streets. We've diminished the user pool for that 8 to 3 window, right? And most people would want to be in the evening. So it's this is one of those open-ended questions that we don't have a good answer for. And I'm really glad that DOT is here to listen, because that's a key factor, right? The timing of these is going to be totally tied in with what the school situation looks like. We have a school on Underhill Avenue that is currently in the footprint of open streets. Will school buses be able to navigate through an open street? Will we have to curtail the open street to allow for the school? Will the school create its own envelope of open streets surrounding it? We'll have to find out, unfortunately, as time rolls on. But for right now, we're trying to be as, one of the other observations in the chat is that if we keep tinkering with it, people aren't going to get ingrained. So we're trying to figure out what the best end game is for all this. We want to make as few recommendations for changes as is possible. The genesis.
Please address Park Place.
I'm sorry? Well,
Please address Park Place. It's
right.
a mess.
Park Place
it's a
is
dangerous thing
one of
for
the insoluble
ambulances and
problems.
emergency vehicles.
Park Place, and I'm glad DOT is here, because the output of Park Place at Vanderbilt is the real culprit here. That light is too short to move the volume of cars that street is being asked to handle. It takes you 3 or 4 light cycles to get through once you're in at all of a congested scenario in an evening or in a morning rush hour, right? And that's why one of our suggestions
Throughout the
move
day.
a couple blocks north of the barricade from Park to St. Mark's should relieve the burden on on Park Place. But you see the trade-offs, right? If we do that, then we've got parents and families who use those blocks of Carlton that are currently open rather, they would lose the use of that. They would have to go a few blocks north.
Why don't you close Prospect Street?
Because adding streets is not part of our ability. We were granted, as Gibb said at the top of the program, we were granted these 2 avenues. We applied for a bunch of east-west streets too. We were not granted them for reasons known to DOT. We cannot add to this program. We cannot expand this program from these 2 avenues. We can tweak, we can nibble at the edges, we can play with hours. But I'm going to go back to the point that we've tried to make a couple of times. Everything depends on the equipment and the manpower. If those streets are not safe and no one uses them because they are not perceived to be safe, that's a failure. And that is where hopefully our volunteerism and the interest that this meeting has suggested is out there will help us bring through the fall. I am going to shift from the chat to asking you to all raise blue hands if you know how to do that. So I'm going to go down the list. Mr. Bobker, have you spoken or would you like to say more?
I have spoken in a limited way. I appreciate the issue for families. It has not changed from pre-COVID, essentially, with small toddlers. I understand school children will be home more and need a solution, but the traffic condition on Park Place is both disruptive to business. I'm trying to work from home. Many people are. It is unhealthy because of the pollution from idling cars, horrendous noise pollution, and most of all, blockage of emergency vehicles, frequent blockage of emergency vehicles.
Noted, and hopefully if we still think after this meeting the changes we're recommending on the Carlton Avenue closed street, open streets are wise, hopefully we will alleviate some of that.
I just want to second what Michael just said. I've lived on Park Place many years, and the traffic has always been horrible coming across. Now it's just ridiculous. You
So
can't
just to
even
be-
sit in your apartment and without the beeping and the horns going off constantly. And it's not just during rush hour, it's all day long.
And to be clear, for those of us who don't know, we're talking about the block of Park Place between Carlton and Vanderbilt.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
Miss Michaela Blissett-Williams.
Hi.
You're muted. You're muted. Unmute.
Hi, how are you guys? I just want to say thank you for all your hard work that you're doing. I'm not a restaurant. I happen to be a salon that's on the block for the last 8 years. And most of our business happens on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And we've seen a decline because of open streets. And I was just wondering if there's any way that we can kind of cross promote with the restaurants or create some activities throughout the block to drive some business down my way. We've all been hit hard. You know, I'm at 50% capacity. I can only do one client at a time. If a client comes in more than 15 minutes late due to traffic, I have to turn that client away. I have no waiting area. I mean, the list of things that we have to go through just to stay alive is really, really hard. We've managed to kind of bring our entire staff back across all of our locations. And now we're looking at having to lay people off if we do not bring some more business in on the weekend. So I don't know what we can do to kind of help businesses that are not restaurants that are also hurting during this pandemic.
No, that's an excellent point, and I don't pretend that we're going to have a solution for you tonight, but it's important to hear participants on the call to think not only of the restaurants who have been permitted to do this outdoor business use, but the other businesses that are probably hurting equally as well. So
I also want to add one thing. I think it's really important that we get every business owner's email and phone number and be able to communicate with them. I was not aware of this program until the Friday that you guys opened up with a letter that was brought into the salon. I have 4 locations, so I'm not always at the location, but I think that we should have everyone's contact number that this is going to affect, because if I had known about this in advance, I would have been able to email my clients and let them know what to expect. which I did once I got the email, but no one stopped in and even
Hopefully
asked
one of
us.
the one of the great things that'll come out of this will be a tighter knit relationship among the merchants of Vanderbilt for whatever stripe you are. Thank you. Next on my list is Jeff Phillips.
Maybe before Jeff, if I could just quickly respond to Michaela's comment. We actually have put together an email distribution list for businesses on Vanderbilt Avenue, and I am happy to add you to it. Right now, most of the traffic there is about running the Open Streets program, but I'm happy to add you to that. Unfortunately, you know, when we went out to do our outreach, there is actually no place we can go to on the internet and type into Google, give me all the email addresses for businesses on Vanderbilt Avenue. That is not possible. That is why we visited physically every business on Vanderbilt Avenue and gave a written notice of the program and tried to engage the owners there as well. There are absolutely businesses where the owner was not present. We left information for the people who were at the business, explained what the program was, and it took the owners a while to catch up. And it's regrettable, but again, there's no dictionary or directory of all of the email addresses for business owners here. We're building that, and we're happy to include you in it.
All right, Mr. Phillips.
So I would just say two things in response to some of the questions in chat. One, I've been responsible for the volunteers, so if you want to complain, I think my email's in the list, so you can send me an email. Two, I just wanted to, Sarah asked this question, she's a volunteer on Carlton Gibb, but when you were talking about volunteers, you're talking sort of supplementing our current volunteers or basically shifting the volunteer effort to PHNVC. And I'm assuming you're thinking I'll still be involved, but.
Anybody who's willing to lift and move a barricade, you're welcome, believe me.
Right.
And the coordination will cross that bridge once we see who's willing to keep running this program into the fall. So thank you, Jeff, for all your time that you put in on this.
And then can we ask a question to DOT directly?
Sure.
Or?
They're free not to answer, but go right ahead.
So, I mean, Kyle, this question of consistency comes up all the time. You know, it's like if you know, I feel like I've gotten pushback, like try to adjust to people's complaints, and people like, it's so inconsistent. What the hell are you doing? And then, you know, so I guess, and we've had the proposal of shifting it later in the day, even presumably we can coordinate that. What's DOT's opinion on the consistency of it has to be 8 to 8 so people understand what's going on?
For our partner managed open streets, which is these types of open streets here that we're talking about, we are willing to work with them on whatever capacity that they are able to provide and what, you know, meets the wider community need. Some only happen 1 day a week from 12 to 3. So if you can do 8 to 8, 7 days a week, great. If not, we are more than happy to work with you on a different type of schedule.
And are there updating of things like messages to the precinct or to Google, those kinds of things?
So Google, I will say, unfortunately, is not as quick to update things as we would like them to do. So we can't necessarily comment on the fact that Google isn't updating it as quickly as we want them to do. I will say that the frequency by which these things change is a lot. So I think that they're just not necessarily interested in changing it as much as we want. But we update our website, we do things on social media. You can always reach out to us via me or the Brooklyn Borough Commissioner's office to talk to about changes. The changes that we discussed, you know, to Vanderbilt and to you know, avenues that run on either side of it, we've already updated our website to reflect the new times as well too. So we've reflected all the new information.
And then, sorry, so I'm dominating here, sorry, Rob. And what's the DOT position on schools and open streets? I mean, obviously there's a school on Underhill. I know there are buses from some of the private smaller schools that come down Carlton. What are you guys thinking about that? Sorry, that's my last question.
A school bus would still be permitted on any type of open street that is 100% considered local traffic. If it's going to a school especially, that's right there. So a school bus during an open street would be more than able to drive down the street. I'm sure some of you might have seen the news today about the wider closures around schools. Through the Open Streets program, those details are mostly going to actually be handled by the Department of Education in coordination with us, but they're very preliminary right now, so I don't really have a lot more to say on that front.
Yeah, I think we're going to be seeing a lot of changes in the next coming weeks, I would venture to guess. So we have to stay nimble. So nothing here is set in stone. Everything is a little flexible, a little tweakable, but we still need to manage expectations that when people want an open street, it will be there if that's what they expect it to be. Saskia Hagens.
Yes, hi, thank you. Let me first say that the Open Streets and Open Restaurants program has been really great and exciting, and I hope we can keep it forever. That being said, I wanted to make a comment / pose a question regarding communication, because for me, it has been quite hard to find out how I could be involved, how things can be improved, and whom to reach out to. So I live on Underhill. I've been quite worried about the barriers being destroyed, removed all the time. I reached out a few times through the DOT Open Streets website, then got referred back to the local precinct, which none of that was particularly helpful. I only found out last week that in fact that page NDC exists to begin with, but is in charge of this. None of that is available information on the DOT Open Streets website. Now, it might be my lack of understanding how things work, but I've lived here for 5 years, and I'm quite sure that many of my neighbors feel sort of similar, that they just simply don't know who is in charge, how they could be involved. For instance, Underhill, even last week when I messaged on the Facebook page, it wasn't quite clear whether there was an official volunteer organization who's in charge of placing the barricades. So I'm sure a lot of people in the neighborhood would be happy to help, but if we simply don't even know that this council exists or how we can contribute, there's a bit of a communication mismatch there.
And you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly why we're doing this tonight, to put names and faces and associations in place. And that's something that any organization can always be better at, because there's always going to be people moving in, people moving out, people moving up, people moving down, and New York never stays the same for 5 consecutive minutes. So we have to work with that. So thank you for sending that email a week or so ago and putting that on our radar screen. It was one of the reasons, again, we're doing this tonight. Communication, communication, communication.
Yeah, and that also comes back to the reopening or closing, whichever way you want to put it, of Underhill on the weekends, which was quite jarring to a lot of us living here. All of a sudden, there were cars racing through the street again on that first Friday. And I think part of that response would have been different if people had simply known.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And again, on an open street on Carlton and Underhill, you should always expect it's a slow street, not a no street, right? You should always expect bikes, cars that need to park, emergency vehicles, sanitation, cars moving for alternate side, right? The buses, those things should be expected on an open street. So again, the expectations managed about the program's composition, we need to do a little better job of that. Sarah Epstein had her hand up, but I don't see it anymore. Carrie Tan.
Hi, I live just around the corner from Vanderbilt on St. John's, and I walk up and down Underhill several times a day. I actually wasn't aware that your group was coordinating volunteers to maintain the open streets until this call. So I thank everybody who's involved with that. Back in beginning of July, I actually got so frustrated with the state of things that I ended up going to the hardware store, buying paint, buying rope, buying all sorts of materials to fix up some of the barriers myself. And I spent a very hot day out there trying to improve some of them. And it was an interesting experience because a lot of people walking, cycling, driving by took the time to stop and talk with me about it. and it was pretty illuminating. None of the drivers understood the meaning of local traffic. That is a very vague term, I think, and it's like understandable. The word local can mean a lot of things. So I think that needs to be clarified. Also, something that hasn't been brought up a lot, but that I got almost universally from people I talk with who are other people of color, was that the blue barricades, in addition to being very flimsy and impossible for a single person to move on their own, the mere fact that they say NYPD on them creates a pretty, for a lot of people in our community, a kind of a hostile environment. And so there was a lot of appreciation expressed for painting over that, which, you know, I understand. So yeah, in general, like I have actually personally dragged some metal barricades, like several blocks, to use on Vanderbilt, because I find those are just easier for everyone. It's easier for the drivers because they can move it themselves. It's easier for the pedestrians.
You mean Underhill?
Yeah, onto Underhill. Yeah, did I say Vanderbilt? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, because our neighborhood is like littered with these metal barricades now, but they're not where we need them to be. So I just.
So a couple great points there. Again, manpower.
Sorry to the NYPD, but I've just been dragging them.
Oh no, manpower and equipment and expectations about who is entitled, and I use that word advisedly, to do the moving and the lifting, right? We'd love to have everybody who touches a barricade be authorized so that they know what they're doing. When we went out and put signage about the change on Underhill, within 10 minutes of putting the signs up, right, they were torn down. There was Facebook comments that who are these vigilantes who are putting up signs and unilaterally. So again, the message didn't get out ahead of the change. And I hear you on that. And same with the repair, right? I know 2 or 3 other people who, just like you, have taken it to their heart to repair a barricade. My daughter got zip ties out once and tried to help it. And it failed, but that's all right. So again, this is, again, if the fruit of this meeting is that we have more manpower to deal with the equipment we have, it's a meeting well taken.
And I just real quick, I would love to hear from the DOT folks a clarification of what is encompassed in local traffic. That would be great.
Is there an official definition of local traffic?
I'm sure there definitely is an official definition. I don't have it memorized, unfortunately, but generally what local traffic, you know, means is, like we've said, someone who might live on the block, someone who has business, whether commerce or they know people that live on that block and they're driving there, a delivery driver, a utility vehicle, of course, an emergency vehicle, anyone who has more or less some sort of connection. It's obviously a very broad, encompassing term, but it's not through traffic, not someone who's going from somewhere in a different part of the city to another part of the city, but is using Underhill or Carlton to get to that place. So that's the difference between through traffic and local traffic.
This is Keith Bray from DOT, and I want to add that if you go to our website, where on open streets, it actually says, you know, when it says no traffic permitted while open streets are in effect, and it says vehicle traffic is limited to local deliveries, pickups, drop-offs, necessary city service vehicles, utility vehicles, and emergency vehicles only. So that's sort of how we were defining it. Cal is right as well. Obviously, people that live on the block, with no intention that they couldn't get their cars to go on the block as well. So that is included in that. And as far as the barriers are concerned, the wooden barriers, they came from the NYPD. So that's why it has the NYPD lettering and wording on it. All the barriers for the Open Streets program is from the NYPD.
But we're free, and somebody posted this in the chat, we're free to modify those. NYPD can complain all they want.
I would just tread lightly on modifying beyond just basic repairs. You know.
I just want to point out that some other neighborhoods have been painting, and I know because some friends of mine were involved in Greenpoint with some discussions with the NYPD about that, and I think it was resolved. So, and actually those wooden barriers have been, what's the word I'm looking for? they have been like decommissioned in a way by the NYPD almost a decade ago. So they don't actually use those anymore for NYPD business. They use the metal barricades. So I know that, you know, I'm not an attorney, this is not legal advice, but it's my understanding is that it's fine to fix and paint them.
Yeah, Carrie posted some pictures at 7:35 p.m. If you go back in the chat, you can look at what some other barricades in other neighborhoods look like. And I've seen a lot of enthusiastic discussions in the chat about people coming up with the branding and the signage to affix to our barricades. Again, presuming that they don't get turned into matchsticks within a day or so of being put out there. It's time well spent to inform the community of what this is all about. And again, presuming that it has a lifetime beyond the opening of schools, which again, we don't know that for sure. We don't have an end date for this. So it's tough to devote a lot of planning and design into a program that could go poof once school's open. Wilma McDaniel, and then Den Gordon after that.
Yes, good evening. My question or possible recommendation is for the DOT representative. You know, I've been hearing complaints about the overflow traffic from Flatbush onto Park Place. As we all know, the challenge is that we are all a bunch of one-way streets. If we are able, or if the DOT is able to put up an electronic sign on Flatbush that explains that Park Place is closed, as is Carlton, you're not going to stop everyone from trying to ease onto Carlton and then get stuck and then make the right onto Park Place. You won't stop them all, but you could potentially stop enough people that they'll realize they cannot use Carlton, they cannot use Park Place. They're basically going to end up in a loop. And then on a weekend, they can't really even use Vanderbilt. They're going to end up in a loop. If you could stop them earlier enough, put the sign around, I don't know, maybe by Sterling, to give those drivers enough notice that they should not attempt to go down that little triangle so that they don't get stuck. I think that could go a long way to helping mitigate some of the traffic overflow.
Not to pat ourselves in the back, Wilma, but that was one of our recommendations that we made to DOT before Open Streets Vanderbilt started up. We said we need some notification there at Vanderbilt and Grand Army Plaza and at Vanderbilt and Atlantic to try to deter drivers. And in all fairness to DOT, those are budgetary issues, and we all know what the budget looks like these days. However, we don't disagree. And I'd like to hear what DOT has to say specifically to that.
So this is Keith Bray again. We can certainly look at VMS. We have not, to my knowledge, unless Cal knows something, done that for other open streets. So that's not been something we've been doing. The one thing I will say is for all open streets we've had, probably one of the bigger DOT issues has been when you have these streets closed, what is the impact on some street? Because some street takes more load of traffic than others. And I've heard about Park Place, and on the chat I've been seeing a lot about Washington Avenue. The example I'm going to use that's very close by here is when Prospect Park West was closed, we heard a lot from Garfield Place residents. A lot about that closure because the traffic on that street from trucks and everything else that started going down Garfield because PPW was blocked from Garfield to 3rd Street was a burden for them. And a lot of things I've seen in the chat from people at Park Place about noise and stuff like that was the same things they're saying. So what I will say is, again, I don't think there's any short-term answers at DOT to have something like that. However, I will check to see if there is a sign, if that's something we can consider, and I will get back to everybody on that, and maybe some other ideas, because I think one of them was, I want to stop here because I want to hear more from everybody else, but when you were saying the signal timing doesn't work on Park Place and Vanderbilt, I just want to have clarification. Was that Vanderbilt and Park you're talking about?
Yeah, Vanderbilt and Park, Keith, because when Vanderbilt is closed, you've just got traffic going further east on Park. You could probably, and this is too fine-grained a solution to implement, when Vanderbilt is closed north of Park Place, you could give more time to the east-west, to the eastbound traffic at Vanderbilt. So maybe a traffic enforcement agent just for Friday nights or something would be a hot spot to put somebody on. Because again, you've got a lot of confused drivers who don't know what to expect. They're trying to get off Flatbush. They can't go down Carlton. They can't go down Vanderbilt. They can't go down Underhill. So that becomes a bit of a pinch point right there. That light at Park at Vanderbilt.
Got it. Thank you for that.
No problem. Seeing a lot of comment in the chat about signage, right? Signage for drivers. This is the type of level that we would need. One of the VMS is a variable message sign. It's those big orange things that blink different messages, right? A paper sign is not going to be seen by a driver. Google Streets does show these open streets when they are closed to through traffic, which is great. So GPS is smart enough to get around it. Any other comments, people who want to be heard? Raise the blue hand. Dan, I forgot about you. Dan Gore.
Hi. It is a very vibrant environment, that's for sure. And I wanted to support Saskia on Underhill Avenue because they've built up a great community there, you know, still into St. John's. So that was really disastrous when it was closed a couple of weekends ago. If anything can be done about that in terms of keeping it open in the evenings, that would be great. There's, because that's a commercial strip as well. Yeah. The other is if there could be some communication given to the MTA, because particularly for Friday evenings, it's really hell on Park Place between Vanderbilt because the buses have not gotten the message to go along Eastern Parkway and down Washington. So they have to turn on Park Place as well.
Dan, thank you for making that point. I meant to mention that at the top because the official route for the northbound B69 is in fact Grand Army Plaza, Eastern Parkway, Washington. However, as we all know, they go their normal route north on Vanderbilt, Park Place, Washington.
That's right. And as I was saying to you, Rob, a couple of Saturdays ago, that there's construction on Park Place between Vanderbilt and Underhill. And the contractors are still here, double parked, and buses coming along here creates havoc, and there's been discussion about emergency vehicles as well. So that would be really good to point that out to the MTA. I'm not sure what the avenue is there.
No, we will, the avenue is being taken. The ears are listening. Anyone else raise their
Yes, we would like to give you an example of what we hear on Park Place every day, all day. What do you have? Never mind.
Multimedia, we tried. I give you plaudits for that. I think we all. Oh. Yeah.
This is from today. This is typical.
Sounds like New York.
Today.
Well, it sounds.
Would it be helpful to put up a no honking sign? Would that be possible?
Or anything if possible.
Ambulance siren.
You know what I mean? There are blocks where I've seen no honking signs.
It's an ambulance trying to go by.
No, I understand, but people honk. Yeah, I don't know what to say to that. I
So
know
a lot of these things, and your block is one of the blocks where it's a problem even when the streets are not open, when open streets are not in effect. It's a problem.
No, this problem has occurred because of open streets. It's occurred since open streets.
We have been
clearly
here
related.
33
We all
years.
know it's related.
I think
we identified the problem. We just gave you a sample of it.
no. But that block definitely needs some help in the best of times.
Thank
the traffic solution, right?
Robert, can I chime in?
Mr. Quigley, yes, sir.
First of all, big fan of open streets. It took a disaster for my neighbors to ordinarily come out and get to know each other. That being said, the 77th precinct should in some way, manner, shape, or form police the streets, like the double parking and things like that, congestion issues. I just did a quick check that the 77th precinct in July issued 1 speeding ticket. And they could work in concert on these arteries, getting the double parkers to move, just like they did on Flatbush. Flatbush used to be a real big problem. Canal Street, you know, all these streets that used to have systemic double parking. And that's one of the things, that Park Place is an artery. It's always been an artery, and now with open streets, it's even more of an artery.
Well, it is worse. Perhaps they could direct traffic either at the Flatbush diversion point or at Vanderbilt to extend the left turn. But we have discussed with the precinct, we've called the precinct, we've had complaint with the precinct through 311. They don't seem inclined to intervene in this. It's not really their jurisdiction. Open streets is not their jurisdiction. So the congestion caused by open streets apparently is not their jurisdiction.
Well, I think that's a bit of a punt on the NYPD's part, because as Kyle said at the get-go and Gibbs at the get-go,
Maybe.
it is technically supposed to be administered, but the administration seemed to take the point of dropping off the barricades and then leaving it to be moved by volunteers. So, you know, I'm not going to hold my breath waiting for NYPD to come around and start enforcing what it's already supposed to enforce in the best of times. That's a conversation for a bigger picture and another day. I think we'd all agree with that. Mr. Flax, you had your hand up for a moment. Do you want to say anything?
Just briefly, to Keith Bray, 10 months ago, you met with the Plaza Street Block Association about all the problems with Grand Army Plaza. We're still awaiting results of your study. When will we get those?
Most of those results I actually believe I gave to, and I'm forgetting the gentleman who was sort of leading the walkthrough that day.
Andrew Saunders?
Yeah. So I think I gave that to him, but I have to check and see, and I will get back to you. But I believe I answered most of them to him.
Great. I know Andrew was here for a minute. He probably has gone to be with other people, but we'll circle back to him. He's one of the volunteers who's helping with Open Streets, so we know where he'll be at a given time. We'll get it out of him. Thank you.
One thing I want to briefly say, and then going back to Open Streets, because this is sort of going off topic that we shouldn't have been doing. But speed humps, I just want to make it clear, which is one of the asks from that meeting. We haven't done speed hump studies in DOT since March, and they're still not doing studies. So that's one of the things I can say there's been no answers on, because we haven't done that citywide since March. All right, so back to Open Streets.
Thank you. Thank you for the rediversion, right? So another thing that should be mentioned, and this is alluded in the chat, Vanderbilt Avenue is the dividing line between two precincts. If you're west of Vanderbilt, you're in the 7-8. If you're east, you're in the 7-7. We all know, what happens at the edges of things. That's where, if anybody's not going to do their job and point to the guy across the street, that's kind of what happens. Any other hand-raised type of questions?
I would just like to say, there's a lot of issues, obviously. I can't speak to Underhill and Carlton, but I am a merchant on Vanderbilt, and it has been fantastic for us. And I want to particularly thank the volunteers. They've made a huge difference. And help moving barricades sounds small, but it's ginormous. At the end of a 12-hour day, if I have someone to help us move the barricades, I really, really appreciate it. And of course, I want to thank Gib and Bob and Denai, who've been there with us so much. And it has made a huge difference to our business. And also all the supportive residents. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Ellen runs Amarina Pizza on Vanderbilt and has been a mainstay of the Avenue for as long as, for the 20 years I've been around. Thank you, Ellen, for your sticking with everything. It's 8:20. We've been rolling for a little over an hour now. We have recorded this meeting. It will be, I believe, available as soon as we figure out the how of that. We have captured the chat. They will all be accessible in the near future. I hope many of you have reached out while we're having this meeting to volunteer, because again, that is central to the continuation of open streets in any way, shape, or form, be it Carlton and Underhill, be it Vanderbilt. We're making no decisions tonight. I think the PHNDC board has heard a lot of good feedback. Our Livable Streets Committee will discuss, and maybe we'll make recommendations to DOT to tweak the program in the way that we've suggested it should be tweaked tonight. But stay tuned. Hopefully you're all on our newsletter email by now and Facebook pages, and hopefully you're all meeting each other. As Mr. Quigley said, it did kind of take a tragedy for us to even sort of recognize the people across the street. We live in New York, and you know who's at your elbows, but not necessarily your people who are in your orbit. It's been one of the good things that's come out of all of this. But I want to thank everybody tonight once again for your time tonight. You know where we are. We'll be the ones moving the barricades at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. and on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays on Vanderbilt. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, DOT. Thank you, Commissioner Bray and Mr. Gorman. And have a good night, everybody.